Chybisa is a fantastic place to start a campaign.
Well, welcome once again to Mind Your Manners. I'm joined with Brent Bailey and Joe Adams. Today we're talking about the Chybisa Kickstarter and hardback book. Brent, as editor, why don't you give us the rundown on this project and what the design goals were for bringing this to print and any changes, and we'll check in with Joe on some of the writing and go from
Sure,
there.
sure. So Chibisa is or Chibisa or Shibise. I've heard it a lot of different ways. Um, so Chibisa is the latest in Columbia Games series of hardback books for the kingdoms. It is the next to last kingdom to be completed. So this book, like the other books in the series, is roughly 130, 136 pages of material about the kingdom of Chybisa. And because Chybisa is the smallest of Harn's kingdoms, uh, the book about the kingdom is slightly shorter than some of the other ones. And that left more room in this book for articles about some of the settlements. So whereas the Caldor book was
Uh-oh.
So
That was quick.
yeah, yeah, where the Caldor book was basically kingdom level, here we were able to add all of the major settlements and Namides Abbey and a trade route. So that has really I think it's appropriate for a kingdom the size of Chybisa, just because your characters are able to get from one end of the kingdom to the other in a day, right? So you didn't want to just give them kingdom level stuff in Burzin. And then, in my experience as a GM, the minute I say, hey, we're all in this city, they do something and get chased out of the city or they need to leave the city. And in this case, this one book will have everything they need to move around.
Yeah, and it's very comprehensive, where the major polities within the kingdom are all present. You get everyone that is going to be a factor in the politics. You get a ton of smaller NPCs. I love the fact that we get to include this trail article because, particularly for this kingdom, everything is dependent on that. Uh,
Exactly.
the trade is integral to the politics and the economic engine that's supporting this kingdom. Um, I think more so than some of the other kingdoms that I've read through, there's also the barbarian tribes as
Right.
a factor. Whereas, some of the other ones we got a lot more with the Gargan and things like that. This one is, heavily influenced by these. Would you even call them nomadic tribes?
Well, the Hodiri are semi-nomadic. They're the horse tribe.
Hmm.
Uh, but the Pagalan who live to the north and basically are the buffer between Caldor and Chybisa, and then you have the Bujak in the hills. They are not. They settle. They have permanent camps, so that really gives them a different dynamic.
Mm.
Um, like you said, the interesting thing is inside the kingdom you have all the little internecine squabbles between the barons and who's able to get the king's ear, and the king of course has got an ulcer because he's so worried about everything else. But then you get, that this kingdom in particular, because it's small, was just decimated by the Red Death and then the Treasure War. And to me, that means a lot of ruins. So, go north of the river and you're gonna have ruined manors and you're gonna have battlefields where people were buried, just all kinds of good stuff that are pure adventure material, just waiting for you.
The compactness of this kingdom really brings the frontier to you, which is, as a GM, very exciting because I don't need to have them trek across an entire kingdom, to get to a frontier and start to interact with some of these other elements that are, outside of normal society. So let's
Joey,
talk a little bit about recent history. Because you mentioned the treasure war. Let's talk about some of the international tensions, and then we'll talk about the internal tensions.
Right.
So
So yeah, internationally, like I said, Verlid, the king of Chybisa, has an ulcer because his little kingdom is claimed by Meldorin. It's claimed by Caldor. Caldor is maybe going to have a secession crisis, but Meldorin at the same time has pretty much ignored them, except to remind them every now and then, we haven't forgotten about you. Um,
they're just
and so
biding their time.
that's well, because they can. The thing with the Genin Trail is, of course, they have to move goods and materials to either Thay or to Tashal because just sitting in Burzin gets them nothing.
Hmm.
And so they're constantly having to, you know, have this economic tie, but they don't know when somebody is going to say, we're just going to not let you come past Laquette, or we're not going to let you come past Osselbridge. And then what? Then we have a huge problem for the kingdom, for the merchants, and also externally, kind of. You mentioned the tribes. The Pagalan have some mischief going on, and what happens if they decide that somebody is building a new manor and it's a little too close to them, or the Bujak decide that somebody's started a mine that isn't where they want it to be, right? So then, I mean, the wars of the past with these tribes have not been very quick or clean. So you've got that problem. Internally, of course, the king is sitting on top of this fractious council of barons. He's got a son that has issues. I'll just leave it with issues. So his son and heir has issues, um, and once those issues really come out to light, well, then he's going to have Verlin's going to have a problem
Yeah.
because he doesn't have another heir.
Well,
And
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's hinted at that the king also has perhaps some heart issues.
so the king
And
has heart issues, yeah, and the son has syphilis.
the son has
So
ulcer.
the
He's got
20-year-old
an
son.
ulcer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then you have a potentially murderous son with early onset syphilis.
yeah, exactly, exactly. What could possibly go wrong?
Um, no, and Brent, you mentioned this on our last discussion, which is you all are writing this from the perspective of interesting conflict. And so we have this central tension at the top. We've got two kingdoms with a claim. We've got the the family drama there that may or may not play out.
Hmm.
And then we have a series of are they earls in this kingdom?
No,
Barons.
there's actually no, yeah, there's no earls in
Barons. Okay.
Chibisa, and there's actually no sheriffs either. It's not divide the kingdom. This is the only kingdom that's not divided into, well, not the only kingdom, but the only kind of feudal kingdom that's not divided into shires and hundreds. Um, there are a handful of barons, and then all the manor lords are under them. And as Joe may have said, that the uh, Chibisa has a council of barons that advise the king, and historically, it's been very powerful in some eras and less powerful in others. But you have these barons then whose families may have um, been more influential in the past,
and may want to be more influential themselves in the future. So there's that tension there between how powerful can the king be with all this other drama going on, if the barons really decided that they might be better off under Caldor or might be
Hmm.
better off under Meldrin.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's telegraphed pretty expressly that some of these folks may or may not be spying. That the king does not necessarily trust them. So if you want to run like a high level politics campaign, there's more than enough drama to go around.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and like I said, my favorite opening to Chybisa is some clan that was kicked out or ran away during the treasure war, comes back, gets one of the barons to sponsor them, but then gets permission to reestablish the family manor. Okay, well, at the tactical level, now you're talking about all the ins and outs of establishing a manor and building a small manor house and those kind of things. But at the kingdom level, you're shifting the power structure
Mm.
because now one of the barons has got something that the other ones don't. And some of these barons are literally just as powerful as the king. It's just that the king has Burzin Castle. And so because he has that, he controls the trade. And quite frankly, it has proven very hard to get him out of that castle should he want to stay there. So yeah, there's just a lot of different levels you could play this at.
there's also religious conflict, as there is in some of the others, but in Chibisa, that takes the shape of um, the, the royal family, as in some of the other kings, is Loranian, but has there's a bit of a conflict between the king himself and the Loranian church, and some see the king and his father, the previous king, as having broken vows in the past, and which they find, highly unbecoming of a Loranian noble. So there's the king has basically said, well, I'm keeping you at arm's length. I'm not giving any lands to the clerical part of the church or anything like that. So, and then you've got the the abbot of Namades Abbey, so which is one of the articles that's included in the book is Namades, and the abbot is this aging firebrand who is railing against the royal family, and he's very anti Verlid and anti Clan Galadoth. So uh, the bishop is a newly appointed bishop, and she was appointed essentially as a peacemaker between the hardliners and the royalty. So that right there gives you like three different angles that you can come at that relationship in the relationship between the primary religion in the kingdom.
And it's interesting too because there is one of his barons, who's a Saraginian. Do I have that right?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and that's also a big point of contention. So we've got
Yeah.
this Avinian noble who bucks all of the social norms and has
Mm-hmm.
won his seat on a bet. And,
Well,
Yes,
and
he
the
did.
and that's the thing about him. Is he noble? He is of unknown provenance.
Yeah,
Uh,
he was a mercenary, and he's been elevated to nobility. He is a baron of Chibisa, so he is he's a nobleman according to. But of course, all the Loranian nobles may not see it such see it such a clear cut thing, and so yeah, he's bucking all of the norms. And now, what happens if he takes a second wife? What happens if he follows some of the other traditional customs of his people? There's a lot that could go on there with his peers.
yeah, I I thought that was like a particularly fun aspect that's in this kingdom. So, kind of switching gears here a little bit, I want to talk about some of the facets of the land that we can play with. And so, we've got a lot of Kuzan mines.
Mhm.
Um, if you want to run something that's kind of perhaps an underground delve, a lot of places for that. Um, we've got in the West, Setha Heath with some funky, esoteric, supernatural things going on. And even more religious tensions out there. So there's,
Yep.
you know, uh, the Navans are up to no good, perhaps in conjunction with some of those tribes that we were talking about earlier. And it probably warrants a separate discussion. I think we probably need to talk about barbarians in the context of Harn. We'll,
Sure.
we'll table that one. But when you were working through different facets to either add or embellish, what were some of the things that stood out to you that you really wanted to play up or bring in as more of a set piece?
So I think so. Brent has talked about the turmoil inside the Loranian church,
Hmm.
uh, the fact that the Loranian church is not as powerful in Chybisa as it is in, say, Caldor.
Yeah.
Um, and you also have this little wrinkle where every other kingdom has an archbishop. But because of Chibisa's unique status of being claimed by two different kingdoms, the Loranian pontiff has declined to name an archbishop. So you got all that. You also have, we wanted to talk about the relationship of the barons and what they were doing and what their goals and ambitions were. The one that's in Larinil, for example, you know, he's got a port now, could that port be used to kind of get stuff in and out of the kingdom? Well, there are some challenges there that prevent that. So what might he do to overcome that? And then, like you said, you also have a traffic flow back and forth across the trade route that is basically the lifeblood of the kingdom. All right, so what things move along that route? When do they move? What kind of opportunities does that bring for a GM? Like you said, if I'm picking this book up and I've got 2 weeks to prep a game session, what would I do? Well, easy enough. Go to Burzin. It's the fair. Look at all the things that are going on in the fair. Or Nomides has its own fair. All right, we could go to the Thread Fair and we could do something there. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities. But those were the big things that stood out. You also see as parts of the location modules, um, details on the mines. How do the mines
Hmm.
work? Details on the courtesan house. How does it work? I mean, these are more than, a sentence or two. They're actually a place where your PCs can go and experience something, and it might not be combat. It might be social. It might be intrigue. It might be, I've got to find something and bring it back. So it's a spell ingredient, that kind of thing. So you've just got a lot of ground you can cover.
It has a bit of everything for being such a small kingdom, which is great.
It is a small kingdom, and even though it is located between its much powerful neighbors, it's rather isolated from those neighbors. And so I know a lot of people like saying that Chibisa is a good starting place. It's a good place for your campaign because it's that you can wrap your head around it easier because there are fewer big players. It's
Right.
isolated that you've got this relatively compact settled lands with you've got this very large area to the north that is just full of barbarians. You've got a very large area to the south that is full of
Full of barbarians. Yeah, I mean, that's it.
and
And
you've
Yeah.
got yeah, and you've got the Annadel Highlands to the east. So it's you've got mountains to one side, you've got heath to one side, you've got grassy plains, and to the north and south. So there's all sorts of things that will keep you focused inward if you would like it to be that way. But as a GM, you also might want to send your players outward, and there's conflict no matter which way you go.
One thing that I picked up reading the article was that Chybis also has kind of an outsized military for its size. So I think there's also, if you want to engage with that conflict, Chybisa can kind of hold its own. So if you did want to kind of pull some strings there, maybe.
But it depends on what level, and I was thinking about this just yesterday. If you want to be very simulationist
Mhm.
and you want to get down to how many wagons of grain do I need to feed the knights, um, Chibisa will starve very quickly. It does not produce enough food for itself. Um, at the and so we've joked around, what would a second treasure war look like? What would happen if the Earl of Ossel decided, hey, I need to bolster my revenue stream. Let me just go down the road and take over Chibisa for a little bit. Um, that I think would be interesting because that would pull in Meldorin, all the barons. When we put together the history section of the kingdom module, there was also there's also a sprinkling of what did your family do when the Caldoran king came down and took over? Were you collaborators? Did you follow Verlid into exile? So there's some of that friction too you know. Um, so I think like Brent said, there's internal conflict if you just want to look inward. There's a mix. There's all external. You can bring it in. Uh, Plenty of places to go.
Coming back to the fair that you mentioned, so all roads do lead to the Genin Trail here. Just to kind of set the stage, because this is an event that almost every campaign could be set around. You have during the spring a procession of goods coming in from the main continent, from Lithia,
Right.
moving all the way up to Caldor, so the next kingdom north,
Mhm.
for a big fair up there, and then returning down south with all the metals and things from up north. Uh,
Salt from the west, furs
mhm.
from the north, all of that. Yeah.
So if you're looking to run a Leah Caver Thieves Guild campaign, that's a perfect opportunity. If you want to pull off a heist, if you're trying to prevent a heist, uh, maybe look into certain embalmers. There's a lot of things surrounding that in here. I really like this. I think it's a tough question as to where I would set my campaign as I start to think through like how I will run this. But I think either as a central set piece at the beginning or you know towards a climax of the campaign, you got to involve that fair. Like that's such a big component of the year in Chybisa. Why don't we shift gears a little bit? We've kind of talked about Burzin a little bit as the big um, kind of city. Big is in quotes, but let's talk about some of the other locations that are in this book. And Laranil was written by Paul Sudlow and Steve Clark.
Right.
Um,
And that's Laranil's actually quite an interesting one because uh, Paul Sudlow wrote Laranil as a Fanon article 15 years ago, and it was rather good. And so when we started working on all of the Chibisa material, the question very quickly came up about, well, what do we do about Laranil? Because it's a keep, so it's a major settlement. Do we write our own version, or do we talk to Paul and see if we can borrow his version? Can we make his version official? And so what we have is kind of a mix of that, where the bones of Laranil are the same between the Columbia Games version and Paul Sudlow's Fanon version. That um, there's a lot of things that are slightly different, where he had things that didn't quite fit in with canon, or didn't quite fit in with the style of how things run. So there are changes to it. It's expanded in ways that we detail the Peonian Abbey. That wasn't part of the original article. Um, but we essentially took his canonized parts of it. But Laranil's interesting in that it's the western edge of the kingdom, so it's out there by Sethaheath, but it has been like the buttress against any attack from the west by the Pagalan barbarians, or the Hodiri barbarians from the south. And so that's it's kind of the farthest away from Burzin, but it is the closest to the sea. So it
Mm-hmm.
does have a small, somewhat active port, but it's way upriver, and it's not a really easily navigable route. So there's not that much trade that comes in from outside the kingdom via maritime trade, because it's very hard to get there, and only smallish ships can really go up the river and that sort of thing. And so it's limited as a port, but it is one that, say, Caldor, which is completely landlocked, it's better than anything they have. So it's kind of attractive to Caldor, as uh, taking over Chybisa again gives them a port to the sea. So Laranil's an interesting place for that reason as well.
And it is the closest trade gate to Eviel, the
Mm.
kingdom of the elves. And so there's not a lot of trade, but what there is going to be very high value, very, talking about your idea for the Leah Kaver, okay, hey,
Yep.
wait, where do we get glass? Well, we get glass from the elves. And look, they're bringing it in.
Now we have a couple other settlements in here. We have Geta,
Mm-hmm.
Geta, Geta.
Geta. I
Um,
say Geta.
okay. We have Geta. We have Ondin. Um, let me just get the clear credit here. For Ondin, this was written by Odgeir Drevdal,
Yep.
with Brent and Justin Howe. Justin, I have not met, as contributors. And then for Geta,
But
Yet it was written by
this,
Edwin King, and Ed King
yeah,
was one of the original 40 years ago
right.
guys. Richard Porter was also an author. This was one where CGI had something to start with, and
Right.
so you look at the contributors: me, Brent, Bill Bean, Steve Clark, Jonathan Davidson. That's where most of the work to bring it all together came from.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. That it was originally published as part of a Columbia Games product called Castles of Harn. So it was like uh, just a collection of castles from across, and it wasn't actually a castle; it was a keep, but still, it was a collection from all the different kingdoms. Um, it was rather short, but as you've talked about, it's a very interesting one because of that. It was won on a bet kind of thing, and so
mhm.
we expanded it. So all of us the newer writers did all the expansion work, but there's still a good chunk of material in there that is now 30 plus years old, the original material for Geta. But that's the one where Joe was talking about earlier, where we've got a 4-page expansion to that one that talks about the mining operation out in the Annadel Highlands. And so it's it's kind of a mining town, or a trade, has some rough edges because it's got a lot of miners coming in on their leaves and stuff like that. And so it's on the eastern side of the kingdom, focused on mining, which makes it different from Laranil. It makes it different from Ondin, which you mentioned, which is the headquarters of the Royal Guard. So the Royal Guard is partially in Burzin, but is also headquartered at Ondin Keep, which is also held by the royal family. So that's kind of a military town. So you've got your mining town, your military town, and your western frontier sort of town.
Richard also did a fantastic job with the art in here.
I really like how he uses SketchUp to actually take the area map, extrude the buildings, and then really kind of zoom through it all to find the best angles to then draw. Because I mean it's incredible stuff that he does.
He has his own YouTube channel where he's publishing those, which I will link in the description here. Is there anything that we skipped over? I mean, we didn't dig into Burzin extensively. Um,
Yeah, well,
was there any?
Burzin, the one thing that's interesting about Burzin is that it is of the 32 pages that were devoted to Burzin, half of that is about the town and the castle itself. But the other 16 pages are a set of those location expansions. So 2 and 4 pages. So where we really dive deep into a particular location. So there's 2 pages about the shipwright and 2 pages about the embalmer. There's 2 pages about the House of Courtesans, 4 about the Loranian Temple, where we really get into more detail about and have the floor plans for those particular locations. So that's a really interesting part of Burzin, because those also then have very explicit adventure hooks called out that you can do things with those particular locations. So as opposed to the in a kingdom or a settlement article, the hooks are kind of just buried everywhere. They're scattered everywhere throughout it. For these, we very specifically call some out, flesh them out a little bit, so they're kind of adventure hooks or they're kickstarters basically for a little adventure where a GM will, what would I use an embalmer for? Well, there's 3 reasons right there. There's 3 adventure hooks that kind of call up situations that you can use that embalmer right off the bat.
I really enjoyed them. As someone that struggles to come up with the initial idea, I love these as a jumping off point. Was there anything that came out of the expansions that everyone just, in the Harn Writers group was just like, oh, this is an amazing idea. We should.
Well, I think people got really excited about not only refreshing the town, the manor, the location, but also doing the little 2 and 4 pagers.
Yeah.
Those they're always a lot of fun because you have a very limited amount of page space. You have to have a map. You have to have a headshot, and so it is an exercise in creativity to just pack as much exciting material in there as you can. And that I think gets people energized, because you write the paragraph location article, the location paragraphs throughout the town or whatever. Well, those are good, but if you get a chance to then expand that to 2 pages, and you can really get characters, get hooks that people can then interact with.
How long, just to help folks appreciate the amount of work that goes into this. When you started in on rewrites, how long was it before you hit, the final? Are we talking like a year? Like what's the time frame that these get written in?
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the release dates and stuff, but because the kingdom was released by itself, and then each of the individual locations was released as part of a Harn quest over a couple of years. I know Laranil
Okay.
was the last one, so Laranil was just last year, the year before. Time flies, and I forget where how long ago things were. Um, I don't remember what year Chybisa even came out, but it would have been the first one, and then we would have followed it up with. Oh no, Ondon actually came out before the Kingdom did. Ondon came out some years back, and again, Geta was a redo. So Geta's been around for a long time, but the revision came out. So I mean, it takes quite a bit of time. But Joe, for the Kingdom itself, I mean, we probably worked on the Kingdom module in one way or another. I mean, over a year. The
Yeah,
kingdoms do take a lot of planning, and they do take a lot of work to
it
get them to.
was it was at least 18 months,
Yeah.
and that's That's me and other people, pulling things together
Yeah.
to get a draft. And then the rest of the group starts picking apart the draft. And then we're,
Right.
revising and expanding. And then once all the writing is done, once pieces of writing are done, then the mapper gets involved. And then then Richard comes in and starts doing the art. So yeah, putting together a kingdom, even one as small as Chybisa, is a
Yeah.
solid 2.5 year project.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that folks realize that a small kingdom does not mean in any really less complex product.
Yeah, we're not slapping this stuff together. That, like you've talked about, that there's a lot of detail, there are a lot of hooks, there's a lot of information that we need to try to pack into a small package, but developing that and like carving away the fat and leaving just the good stuff, it is a lengthy process.
Well, is there anything that anyone else wanted to put out there as far as topics or things you wanted to highlight?
No, I want to kind of reinforce or emphasize. I think Chibisa is a fantastic place to start a campaign.
Yep.
If somebody wants to find out what Harn is about, I would say you could do this hardback and the Barbarians article, and you've got all you need right there
Yep.
to get started. There are so many hooks. They reestablish the old family homestead. You've got the one that I used was actually retainers of a knight of the Lady of Paladins who had died in the crusade, and they have to bring his heart back to his chapter for burial. They have to go up the Gennan Trail, and oh wait, somebody has a chest. There must be something important in it. And so that was a lot of fun. And then you've got the mining, and so you could play any number of different things in Chibisa.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like, this is a perfect book to start at the local level. You don't need to
Exactly.
have a
Yes.
kingdom spanning thing. You don't need to memorize a million places. Just start small. Just pick one of the
Yep.
keeps and go from there. And you can
So
expand.
Right.
yeah, years ago, somebody did a comparison and they overlaid the map of the Kingdom of Chybisa, and it basically fits right over the Washington, D.C. metro area.
Oh, no
So,
kidding.
it's that small. I mean, in fact, if for the folks that are watching this from the UK, it fits inside the ring that goes around London. So it is not a big place, but there is a lot going on.
Well, why don't we wrap here? Um, Joe, would you like to promote anything?
Well, yeah, let me give my plug for Tona Hexus, the Harn fanzine. I'm about to put out the call for articles for the next issue. So if you're interested, or anybody somebody that might be interested, send your pitch to tonahexus@gmail.com, or you can go to lithia.com and download all the back issues for free and see what kind of things we put in there. So I look forward to hearing from folks.
Perfect. Brent, would you like to promote anything?
No, I think we've hit the Kickstarter for Chivisa still running, and so now's the opportunity to be one of the first on your block to own the hardback book. So that's the plug for this one.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll kill it there. Um, thanks, guys.